times they were open and what I would need to bring with me. It all seemed very positive, until I reached the bottom of the letter. Almost as an afterthought was the comment, "We regret that Princess Louise's files are closed." I could visit the archive buildings, but would not be allowed to view the files I needed to see. I tried her husband's family's collection in Inverary, Scotland, where my several applications, phone and email, were kindly but firmly rebuffed. On my initial approach, I discovered that their archives were in the process of being rehoused, and it would be over a year before they could be accessed again. More than a year later, I was told they were still inaccessible, and the same some months afterwards. My last 2 inquiries simply went unanswered. When I visited Inverary as a tourist in the summer of 2012, I was told by a curator inside the castle that the archives had not been rehoused. The curator also mentioned that it was almost impossible for researchers to get into the archives. Even people working at the castle itself were denied access. I discovered that it was not only information about Princess Louise that had been hidden away, but information about a vast number of people who had played a role in her life, including royal servants and her art tutors. A great many items about these people that one would expect to be in other collections have been absorbed into the royal collection. Archivists at the National Gallery, Royal Academy, and the V&A, as well as overseas collections in Malta, Bermuda, and Canada, were bemused to discover that primary sources I requested had been removed to Windsor. Over the decades, there has been some very careful sanitizing of Princess Louise's reputation and a whitewashing of her life, her achievements, and her personality. Initially, this book was intended to be a complete artistic biography, but as it became apparent that this was not possible, I began to realize that one of the most intriguing aspects had become the journey to try and find her. My working title became The Mystery of Princess Louise. There were so many rumors, some seemingly outlandish, that initially I had dismissed many of them as mere gossip, but the extraordinary secrecy that surrounds her life and the many obstacles placed in the way of researching her made me wonder if they were true. I have not been able to substantiate, nor could I disprove, the rumors that have been passed on to me from various people's oral family history, as well as tittle-tattle of the era, that perhaps there really is no smoke without fire. I have drawn my own conclusions and shall leave you to decide for yourselves. For some of the original research, I am greatly indebted to Michael Gledhill, QC. As a law student in the 1970s, he became intrigued by Princess Louise and began working on a biography. In order to research her life, he placed adverts in national and local newspapers and magazines. Because Princess Louise had lived until 1939, he received fascinating responses from people who had known her and, in some cases, worked for her. He very kindly allowed me to see the letters. I am also indebted to the Locock family, who have been extremely helpful and generous with their time, as well as sharing with me their family memorabilia. It is important for listeners to be aware that although Queen Victoria wrote letters and diary entries almost every day, those that are now in the archives and available online are not her original work. The Queen's journals and letters were heavily edited following her death by her youngest child, Princess Beatrice. The princess went through them and removed anything that she considered controversial, then copied out the journal entries and many of the letters and destroyed the originals. At times when the Queen's journals record extremely unpleasant comments about her family, it is astonishing to realize that Beatrice considered these acceptable. It makes one wonder just how much more controversial must have been the passages that Beatrice removed. Queen Victoria is often described as a